And next on our agenda this morning is the panel session. Let me know if you're excited about this panel session. Very quickly, I'll introduce our speakers for the panel session and we'll just go right into it. Unfortunately, one of our speakers is unable to join. She had an emergency this morning, but she's all right. However, she's unable to join us for this session this morning. So we'll be having 3 speakers for our panel session and also for the workshop. So I'll introduce them really quickly so that we can delve right in. So our first speaker is Godfrey Adejumoh. He's the head corporate affairs and sustainability business, Unilever Nigeria. Please make him feel welcome. We also have with us this morning Iyanuoluwa Fatoba, who is the communications manager, World Benchmarking Alliance, as WBA, the Netherlands. You're welcome. And finally, we have with us this morning Niyi Fagbemi, a travel and documentary filmmaker. You are all welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you very much. Welcome, welcome our amazing speakers. We're so delighted to have you here this morning. And we'll just go right into this panel session. We have a couple of questions that would like you to sort of expand on based on your area of expertise. And we'll be starting with Godfrey this morning. Our first topic or our first question really is from your own perspective, what is the potency of storytelling to influence development in Africa? And really, how can we effectively, use stories for influence? Over to you, Godfrey.
Okay, morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me, Joy, me, Iyanuoluwa, and everyone. Just confirm you can hear me. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Just to confess that Kehinde has said everything, so I'll really struggle to add anything to what she said because she really has emptied everything. She spoke about influencing and all of that. I really enjoyed listening to her. And also to say, last night when I thought about this session, I was asking myself, how do I look African? I was very confused and I just went into my wardrobe and wore this. And when I came in and I saw Joy, I just said, this is African. Like everything about Joy is very African. So those were things I wanted to drop first so that we don't come up here and be so uptight. Truth is, learning is better when it is in a relaxed atmosphere. So I'm not one that is I'm not a professor. I'm just like every other person. What I know is what I have learned through the years on the job. I prayed to be to Harvard, but I haven't been yet. So whatever I say is my story. It might not be your story, but it is what I'm able to share. So glad to be here and thanks everyone. So to the question, what is the influence of storytelling? First is to understand what is storytelling. And to be honest, everybody has a story and everybody is telling a story. Like there is nobody that doesn't have a story. Some will say, why is this person out there? I'm even better than the person. Why am I not out there? The only thing I will say is you frame your narrative. Like you frame your narrative. You look at it from the end point of view. What do I hope to attain? So you heard when Kehinde said, there is limited resources. So do you want to attract a share of it? Your story is your way to attract that limited resources. You have a lot of young people now in Africa, not in diaspora, right in our continent, like Flutterwave and all of that. They raise huge amount of money. They didn't do it because they knew the end from the start. They just started with the guts of, I can do this. So if you ask me, how do you shape and influence your story? It is think from the end to the start. Like, what do you want to achieve? Once you have that in mind, you work towards it, you re-engineer, you rethink your processes. So I am not one that writes a message and send out because I am the expert. I am one that writes a message and take to someone who is a non-comms person and say, please read this. If you read it and you understand it, it means I have communicated. But if you read it and you're asking me, what does this mean? I have not communicated. So the real power of storytelling and how it shapes and influences people is clarity, understanding, simplicity. The simpler you keep it, the clearer it is. The clearer it is, the more you communicate. The more people understand what you're communicating, the more they buy into your ideology. So the moment all of this is missing, simplicity, clarity, and all of that, you will begin to ask yourself, why am I not getting it? Why am I not getting it? It is because you have not re-engineered your style, your framing, and your modeling. So I don't know if that's in any way good response, but that's what I have to share for a start. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really, really good. I think I particularly liked when you said that when you develop something, share it with a non-comms person, let them look at it. If they can understand it, then you're good to go. If they have questions, nah, you're not there yet. Clarity, understanding, and simplicity. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll move over to Iyanuoluwa.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to answer the same question?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Joy, and thank you, Godfrey. I actually think that you sort of already articulated some of the things, most of the things that I wanted to say in terms of how can we use storytelling to influence development in Africa. I think one of the key things for me when it comes to story, now what makes stories good or what defines storytelling is that it captures real experiences, is that it captures real people, it captures real voices. I work in a place where we deal with a lot of data, and then I say to my team, like, all this data, they do not make sense if you cannot bring it to the perspective of human. So when you say that, for example, you want food and agriculture companies, for example, to take a particular action and pay farmers living wage, what does that translate to in the life of smallholder farmers? When you are saying that corporations, you have gender balanced boards, what does that mean for decision making? What does that mean for operations? When you are saying that a particular government, federal or state, should sort of pay attention to a particular public good, what does that translate to? How does that translate to social equity, for example? So what makes a story is that it is relatable. It captures real experiences. It is that it captures real voices of real people and real communities that you're trying to advocate for. So basically, I think if that element is sort of solid and it is there, then you can begin to now talk about everything that Mr. Godfrey said about keeping it simple, making it authentic, keeping it genuine, and then ensure that it captures the experiences of people accurately. And I mean, and on top of my head, I could list some of the pathways to storytelling that we explored. Even in Nigeria, the NSAS movement, people took to social media to begin to talk about their own personal experiences with the Nigerian police force. The Me Too movement, people took to social media to share about sexual harassment, their experience with sexual harassment, and even move beyond social media. Years ago, about women riots, they took to using dance, actions, music, and things like that, just to make people understand the kind of social injustice that they face, and the kind of action that they need from stakeholders and from the government. So yeah, I'll just keep it there. For me, storytelling is very powerful. It's a very powerful tool, but then it is not a story if it is not capturing, if there's no human element to it, if it is not capturing the experiences, real life experiences of people. And then it is also not a story if it is not simple, if it is not genuine, and if it is not, if the local context is missing, basically. But I think we'll still talk about that, so I don't want to say too much, but I think answers the question.
Thank you so much, Iyanuoluwa. I particularly like that you mentioned the genuineness of the stories that we tell and how they have to capture real experiences. Those are the things that resonate with people the most. And just speaking to, the EndSARS movement and how, many people came forward to share their real life experiences. It made it more relatable. It made us understand that, okay, this is happening to real life people. This is happening to people that you and I know. And that made it easier for us to understand and relate with it. Thank you so much. Niyi, do you have one or two things that you want to add to that, please?
Okay, thanks so much. I think maybe before I start, I'll just say thanks to Lip Africa for this platform as well. I think it's very key that we as Africans also come together to discuss, things about Africa and also how we can move things forward as well. So I think maybe for me, what I can just say regarding storytelling, which is very important, is Africans, we need to tell our own stories ourselves. You get, so when we're growing up, in the past, it's been very, very common for people to tell our own stories. So rather than hear about somewhere that is in our backyard from our neighbor, we're going to be hearing about somewhere that is in our backyard from the Western media and from things online and stuff like that. So I think nowadays it's become, there's been a lot of ground gained. And when it comes to telling our own stories, but there's still more to be done. So I just think that we as Africans need to tell our own stories ourselves and educate ourselves, which also helps to bring development and also helps to tell the true stories which haven't really been told before. I think one other thing I also want to say is it's also key to also enlighten each other. I think one instance I always give people is, for instance, you can hear a lot of places about Nigeria, about Africa, but you don't necessarily have a pictorial representation of that place. And one thing which is very important in my field is being able to give people an experience without without having to visit these places. So for instance, let's think of something like Katsina State, for instance, or let's think of something like Mount Kilimanjaro. You could have heard the word before, but you do not necessarily know how these places look, except you visited them, or except, you do some research. But I think nowadays it's a lot easier to have a very clear picture of Mount Kilimanjaro. But for something like Katsina now, for instance, I've been there severally. I've been to Borno State. A lot of what you hear about all these places is, it's the bad news, which is what drives the Western media. But if you actually go to all these places, you see that, there's really life outside Lagos. There's really life outside Abuja. These people, they live their normal lives, and there's a lot of stories to be told there. So I think maybe what I'll just say is, it's important for we Africans to tell our own stories in the best way possible to be able to drive development. And also, there's a lot more to be said, but I'm sure we'll discuss further in the breakout sessions as well.
Thank you so much, Niyi, for sharing. And very important what you said about us telling our stories ourselves, and not just feeding the Western, feeding the narrative of the Western media, which is really to portray Africa as a poor continent that needs the savior, the savior being the Western world, to swoop in and do something. Thank you so much. And I particularly like that you mentioned that. It just reminded me of how growing up we would read so many books about the Western world from different authors that sort of give us a picture of what those communities look like and how they operate. So much so that when you have conversations with people who live there or grew up there, you can actually relate because you've read about these things. And, it's important that we do that for ourselves, for Africa. And I must say that I've seen some of your work that you've done on Nigerian states. I'm like, wait a minute, that's Nigeria? It's really, really important that we do that. Thank you so much. Very quickly, we'll move on to the next and final question for this panel session. So in the context of Africa's development, right, what narratives must we harness? Because there are different facets to us as Africa. We're a multi-lingual continent. We have so many cultures across the continent. Which of the narratives is important for us to harness? Iyanuoluwa, do you want to start this? Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Yeah, I can start. So I think in terms of the kind of stories that we need to harness, I would like to answer that from two perspectives, and I'll be very quick. there's the, like we've already discussed and like Niyi already mentioned, that we can't tell our own stories and we need to show the true picture of what Africa looks like. It just reminds me of, I think sometime last year, I was talking to, I was in a gathering, let me not mention the name of the person. And then she was like, oh, do you guys have where to watch Barbie in Nigeria? And then the thing is, I hear things like that, right? You know, when people say it in the news, but then I never thought it would happen to me. And then I was like taken aback, like, what do you mean? Nigeria, we have cinemas. Like, I just didn't even know how to approach that. So there's stereotypes like that that we need to sort of start, you know, breaking down those kind of stereotypes. I remember when Megan also was around, and then somebody had said something about, oh, Nigeria was a Muslim state, and you know, people had to start saying that no, Nigeria is not dominantly a Muslim state. We have like a mixture of, you know, Christian and Muslims. So I just give those examples to say that there's the aspect of we are activating that part of our narrative and trying to tell our stories more. You know, I tell people, yeah, we need to tell stories about hunger in the land. We need to tell stories about, you know, children that are hungry, out of school children, women that are, you know, that are working without being paid. But do we need to make them look dejected while telling the stories? No. Do we need to make them look hungry, subjugated, like, look like they are very helpless? No, we don't. Do we need to talk about the fact that we have development issues? Definitely, we need to talk about those things. But do we need to paint Africa, Nigeria as, you know, a very hopeless, helpless, poverty-stricken place? No, we don't. There's a way you can craft and frame your narrative such that you are spotlighting the problem, but you are also like, you are retaining the dignity of Africa, in quote. So that's one perspective, in that, you know, we need to challenge those dominant narratives and start telling our stories and start, you know, mainstreaming some of those conversations about Africa. And then within the context of development and advocacy, which is where I am situated, I would say, let's take it a little bit further and say that if you look at the SDGs and the, you know, ESG, these are two powerful frameworks that we already have, you know, that sort of lays down the foundation or lays down the pathway of development for whether the global north or the global south. And we have poverty, we have zero hunger, we have WASH, we have gender equality. And I'll say that as professionals, a key thing to do in that regard is look at those two frameworks and say that, okay, my interest is, for example, gender equality. And then if that's your interest, you situate yourself within that narrative and begin to probe for that, okay, what kind of narrative do we need to spotlight for gender equality? What kind of narrative do we need to spotlight for poverty? What kind of narrative do we need to spotlight for income inequality, for example? And if you also find yourself on the business side of things, and I know that Mr. Godfrey will be able to relate very well, and then you are like, on the business side of, okay, what's the impact of business on the environment? What kind of stories do you want to tell? How do you want to situate your business? You know, how do you want to communicate the impact of your business on the environment without greenwashing, and with also saying that, okay, we understand that our actions affect the people, but this is what we are doing to mitigate those actions. So bringing those two thoughts together, challenging the dominant narratives, we need to keep harnessing those stories. We need to keep telling those stories. And that's why I really love Niyi's work. And secondly, within the practice, development practice, look within the SDGs and situate yourself within that framework and try to now probe further and, you know, just try to explore that ecosystem and see how better you can tell stories just to influence action. I don't know if that, you know, touches on the answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iyanuoluwa. We need to challenge the dominant narratives. And I particularly like that you spoke about that. And I think that one major thing that you said is, you know, that no matter where you really situate yourself within the SDGs, it's important that you preserve the dignity of Africa. That really stood out to me, preserving the dignity of Africa. You know, no matter what story it is that we're telling, even if we're telling the story of communities that have a lot of poverty, that need help, you know, of situations that are really dire, we need to still preserve the dignity of the people we're talking about and the dignity of Africa as a continent. Niyi, I saw that you agreed with a lot of things that Iyanuoluwa was talking about, so would also like to hear from you.
Okay, thanks so much, Joy. I think maybe like Iyanu said, one thing that actually stood out for me is, I mean, you should be able to show, you should be able to pass across a message without being able to show something in the bad light. So, for instance, in my own field, if I'm doing like a documentary about the state of the nation, or the state of this particular side of the nation, you don't necessarily have to show like all the things in a bad light, you can still pass across that message without showing, like, let's say, a child that is dirty, I mean, naked children, stuff like that. So they are really, I mean, it's really, really key to ensure like we control those narratives. So I think maybe just to answer the question now, so in terms of harnessing the narrative, sorry, in terms of harnessing the narrative, this practically means being able to control the narrative. So we need to control our own narrative, because that's what's going to help us. So for instance, I think it would be wrong for me to hear about, let's say, Iyanu, for instance, now from someone else, and I mean, what that person is saying is not necessarily true, or because I'm hearing it from that person first, I mean, it's just going to change my perception about Iyanu, irrespective of whether whether it is true or not. You get so, but maybe when I now speak with Iyanu, I can now say, oh, I mean, based on what I've experienced now, I mean, it's definitely different from what I've heard before. So, I mean, that's just an example. So in order to answer the questions, right? So I think maybe one of the things that some of the things we need to control. So I'll be speaking maybe towards my own field as well, is number one, being able to spotlight positive change and progress, which helps like the nation and the continent overall. Also being able to spotlight our own people and our own culture. One way we can do that is being able to show like the beautiful colors. I mean, one thing I ensure that I do in my field is being able to capture not only my own culture, not only my own nation, but also, I mean, places around Africa, so that people can see that, oh, okay, I mean, I don't necessarily need to book a holiday to Venice, Italy, or Geneva, Switzerland, to be able to experience, I mean, something new. I can just say, oh, I want to come to Lagos, Nigeria. I want to go to Ogun State for like the Ojide Oba, for instance. I want to go to like Tanzania to like experience like the Maasai culture. So stuff like that. So it's really important to document our own culture, which also helps to preserve it as well. So I think maybe another thing I'll also mention is it's good that we also control the narrative when it comes to the tourism potential, and also being able to show people places. When you see a lot of things online, I think one thing that can help out, when you see a lot of things online about a place, I mean, it really helps to drive people to actually come to that place. So if I did not necessarily see something about, let's say, a new restaurant that opened in Lagos, there's no way I'm going to find my way there unless I see it. You get to, I mean, nowadays people say something like seeing is believing. So it's just very important for us to control the narrative by showing people things. And I think maybe the last one, which ties to Iyanu's point as well, is which is one thing I majorly do, is through documentary films as well, which I mean, you can pass across a message of something not going really well without being able to identify somebody. So that, I think that's pretty much it for my own end.
Thank you so much, Niyi. I think one key thing that you mentioned is spotlighting positive change, really, and also spotlighting our culture, which helps us to preserve it. I like that you touched on the potential of tourism. And I think that that's a very important point, because it's one of the ways that we can generate revenue for our nation and for our continent. It's something that several other countries of the world have majored on, just showcasing these amazing and beautiful tourism spots that they have. You see it online and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to visit that place. But you have similar places in your nation, literally in the state next to you. But because you don't know, no one has ever told you or shown you, so you don't have that information and you're not able to make an informed decision and, you know, keep the revenue in your own nation and in your own continent, so that we can use that revenue to develop our continent, really. Thank you so much, Niyi. Would like to hear from you now, Godfrey. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful points by Niyi and Iyanuoluwa. Let me just add very little or nothing to say that, see, I don't know if people realize that the future of the world right now is the African continent. You can Google it, like just say future of the world. Which continent is the future of the world? It's Africa, like it's in black and white. Ask yourself why. The reason is very simple. About 60% of our population in Africa is about 25 years old. These are the people that will be makers and shakers and movers of the world tomorrow. When they say the future is in the hands of young people, just know that they are saying that the future of the world is in Africa. That's a story that needs to be out there. That's a story that needs to be sustained, because the indices shows that we'll continue on this trajectory for a very long time, like beyond the 2020 that we are in, deep into 21 something, it will remain so. And let me now also unpack where Niyi and Iyanuoluwa mentioned culture. There's something about our culture, and the way I will sum it is in the words of one of our African thinkers, J.S. Mbutu. He said, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. So what is the African culture? The African culture is family. The African culture is originality, is we first before I, if you get what I mean. So we need to let the world know that while they are going in the individual approach of their style of governance, we are very inclusive. So that is why the diversity of our languages, of our culture, it is in no way a minus. It is everything positive. I do not think, and Niyi, please correct me, no country, no continent in the world has more beautiful colors than the continent of Africa. Like, that's what I think. The question is, how do we focus on this positive? I've said the future of the world is Africa in terms of statistics and data. Young people, they will control the world. They're already doing it. Tech, innovation, everything, data, what you can do at your age. Someone 10 years younger than you will do that in less the time processing that you are wasting, because they have that mindset to innovate. They are faster and all of that. So how do we play up consistently with that narrative that the future is here? And let me also tell you what Tony Elumelu said recently at a conversation somewhere, I think in Germany or so. Africa does not need aid. Africa needs investment. There's a difference between aid and investment. Aid is like, I pity you, you are hopeless. And so I'm your Jesus Christ, I'm your Muhammad, I'm your this. So I've come to save you. But investment is, I see opportunity. I want to handshake you and partner with you that we can become partners in progress. Who does this better than we Africans? So I submit by saying that there's so much we can play up from the futuristic perspective of where does the future lie, is Africa, from our culture, which is very family, and we need to preserve and protect it. And lastly, from the point of, it is not about aid, it is about investment, which is partnership. And this is what Africa is about.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful. Africa does not need aids. Africa needs investments, you know. I particularly like some of the things that you said, and how you mentioned that the future of the world is Africa. And you spoke about the culture of Africans, you know, one of it is our diversity and inclusion. It's so interesting that we're so diverse, yet we're quite inclusive, and we value family. It's amazing, and that's one of the things that really sets us apart from other worlds and other cultures, that family thing where we're able to come together and help one another, and you know, just be there to support the work that every other person is doing. Thank you so much, sir, for your submission. Very quickly, we'll take one question. Okay, we'll take one very quick question from Kenny. Okay, yes. Kenny, you can go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. I made it. Thank you so much, Godfrey, Iyanuoluwa, and Niyi, for the brilliant things you've already shared. I just have one quick question for you all, and that is the cost of storytelling, because you've all expressed in many ways why we should be telling stories. But I also know there is a cost to this, financial cost, in-kind support, or whatever. What are those things when you think about movies, documentaries, content creation, and content marketing, and all of these things? is it real that we can afford to tell the kind of stories that we should tell, and what does it cost us to tell any kind of story?
All right, thank you,
That's
Kemi,
the
for that
question.
question. What's the cost of storytelling? Niyi, let's start with you.
Okay. Thanks so much. I think maybe I wouldn't go into like details in terms of figures, but what I would just say, I mean, starting out is so we should not necessarily see storytelling as something that is really expensive, right? So you can tell stories from a small place, you can tell stories from a big place, you can tell stories I mean with a big budget or a small budget, you get. So I think maybe one practical thing to actually even note is, let's look at Instagram Reels, for instance. I mean, nowadays, what actually goes viral is not necessarily what has been shot like with a professional camera with like a team of 100 people. It can be just something that somebody just recorded with their phone. And I mean, that will end up going much more viral than maybe the kind of works that I do and stuff like that, you get. So it's just being able to show that you don't necessarily have to be fully equipped, or you don't necessarily have to have like all the funds in the world to be able to tell these stories. So you can tell stories of your backyard, tell stories of places within your community. So me, I actually live in Abuja, and one thing that was very paramount to the way I started what I'm doing is I didn't just start by saying, oh, Niyi is going to travel from Abuja straight into Lagos to start documenting Lagos. You get, so I actually started out in Abuja. You get, I started out from my own community, being able to just do like a 30-minute drive, take some shots and stuff like that. So in terms of like the overall cost, I mean, there's been no like constant figure to it. But like I said, just start from where you are, do like something small and you shouldn't have any problem. So in terms of the costing now, right? So depending on what you want to do, I mean, there's like different budgets you can have, but like I said, you don't necessarily need to focus too much into that detail. I can speak a lot more about that maybe in the breakout session, but just for a general overview, I think this is just the best mindset to have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Niyi. I don't know if, okay, I can't see Iyanuoluwa's video, so I don't know if Mr. Godfrey has one or two things that he wants to add to that.
Okay, I'll just say, Niyi had mentioned start from where you are. I would just say start with what you have. And you know what we all have? We have ourselves, like we have our minds. Your mind can think. So don't look at the guy who is out there, successful, making all the waves. The guy actually started, he or she started from himself, herself. Do you get it? It's difficult to unpack this because people will be like, no, there's monetary cost to it. Yes, there is, but start with yourself. Like, start with yourself. You will not become what you want to be if you do not start with yourself, with what you have, and from where you are. It begins from those baby steps. And let me also tell you, please, failure is not a determining factor of how far you will go in life. So I always tell people, please plan and even pray to fail. The people who work with me, I tell them that if I know anything today, it's mostly from the very embarrassing moment of my career that I've learned the most than from the glorious moments. So we come into this journey thinking you start today, tomorrow I'm a star. No, it will never happen. Go and talk to Niyi again. That drive, he said he drove 30 minutes. There were times he trekked. There were times his camera was not of the quality he's using now. There were times he went, Niyi, there were times like maybe to eat a particular meal was not there, but he had himself, he had his mind, and he had what he wanted to do, and he started. You get it? For me, I tell one person that I'm one of the most traveled person around the world because I watch a lot of series, a lot of movies, African, and you ask me which country, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it because I am just exposing myself on my seat. The day will come that I can afford it and I will go. So if you hear nothing, please start with yourself, which is you have yourself, you have your mind. If you do not start with that, the resources you are looking for will never come. And the last thing is to say, please, failure is not a determining factor of how far you will go. Fail again, experiment again and again, and just one thing will happen and you will find yourself on the other side.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Phil. Failure does not determine how far you would go. Fail forward, fail fast, and learn from those moments. Iyanuoluwa, I don't know if you would like to quickly add one or two things before we move on.
I mean, I think Godfrey and Niyi already spoke to it, but just a very slightly, just addition that I think I would say is that now when it comes to storytelling is not just visual. Like there are different ways to tell stories, right? There's writing, there's art, there's music, there's different artistic expressions. So I think that from my experience, one of the things that I ask for is that, okay, if we're trying to like create a story, what budget do we have? And then that determines, okay, we can go high or we can go low. Do you understand? And I think that's the first thing that you need to be very, very, very truthful to yourself that, okay, what kind of resources are available to me? And then when you see the resources, you can now begin to say, okay, maybe we don't have to like do something really big yet, but we can, start from this small space. And then even at that, you can also like sort of think about collaborations, because I think that's one thing that most people don't really explore. Most resources that you need is in the hands of another partner. For example, I mean, Niyi is even here. You can say that, oh, I have this concept and this is the kind of story I want to tell. How do we, begin to collaborate? Because obviously he has the resources, he has the means, he has the equipment, and then you begin to explore. Currently, we are trying to like create stories of small scale holders in Africa from my organization. We are based in Europe. Number one, we don't have the people in Europe, they don't have the context. Then number two, they're not even close to these farmers. And then what we're exploring, one of the things we're exploring is partnership with some of the locally based NGOs to say, okay, this is what we're trying to do. And we know that you guys have the resources. How can we have the data? You have the resources to tell the stories. How can we come together to, to bring these stories alive? So it's not a black or white situation. It's just basically looking at what's available to you and try to like walk around it and explore it. But then when it now comes to big organizations like Leap Africa, I would expect that, of course, there's like some level of budgeting that goes into, okay, how many stories do you want to tell in a year? And then what are we willing to invest in it? So, but we'll talk about, there are different dimensions to it, and we'll talk about that during the breakout session, but I'll just leave that here for now.
Thank you so much, Iyanuoluwa. I particularly like that you mentioned collaboration. Collaboration is very key. It gets you the resources that you don't have at no cost, really. Just exchanging value, gets you there. Thank you so much. This has been an insightful panel session, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm sure that other people on the call also did enjoy it.